Hello, Jeff Kelly here. I just thought I'd show you my recently purchased 2.5 inch COLT Python, and I've put together some information about it. It's a 1963, and this is just to give you a quick look at what great shape it's in. So this goes about 2 minutes, and then I get into the video. The COLT Python, the holy grail of Colt firearms of the 1950s and 60s. This one here is a 1963 2.5 inch with the box and the papers. The only thing it's missing is the target. And I picked this up for $4,900 about 5 months ago. I wanted to do a video on the COLT 2.5 inch Python from the 1960s and give you as much as humanly possible as far as information goes on it, because I think you will find at the end of this video that Colt did not promote the 2.5 inch Python very well through gun magazines or in any other type of media, which, if you saw my previous video, Colt was late to the party on the .44 Magnum, late to the party on the .357 Magnum, and their promotion of their products was pretty miserable in the 1960s. So let's talk about this one. There were two Colt engineers that wanted to play a joke on the manager of the production line, and they decided to put a 2.5 inch barrel on what then was only 4-inch and 6-inch barrel models. And the manager of the production line liked it so much, he put it into production. They started selling them, sending them out to dealers in August of 1963. This one went out to a dealer on August 23rd, 1963, and there were only 1,000 2.5 inch Pythons sold in 1963 from August until the end of the year. They started cataloging them in 1964. Gun Digest got them in their publication in 1964. Some of the shooting magazines had small articles on them in 1964 and 1965. They weren't featured on the covers of any of the major shooting magazines, and they were more or less just an afterthought. So let's get into some of the research material that I took a look at. And first of all, the story of the joke being played on the assembly line manager is in this book, Collector's Guide to Colt, an American Classic, by Michael Haskew, and it is on page 104. Well, actually, it's on. It's a little later on. It's on page 106. Sorry about that. And it says, here's the paragraph right here. I've copied it so you can look at it later on in the video. Talking about the senior management and the snub nose. They also, as long as I'm in this book here, Ian Fleming in 1964 was given a python with his name etched in on the side plate right there, and he, as we know, died in 1964, but he was given a 2.5-inch python. The next reference I used was the Seven Serpents book, and it states on page 34 when the 2.5-inch barrel came out, and it was cataloged in 1964, and that's the only reference, other than some advertisements that were in this, that are even in this book. The next reference is Colt pythons. And in this one here, they discuss the amount of pythons that were released in 1963, and it goes into much more detail as far as getting down to the price list. In 1964 marked the first official appearance of the Colt Python 2.5-inch, and they started shipping them in August 1963. Through December 31st, they'd shipped 1,000 pythons. There's so then we have the one sheet advertisement, which I'll also put at the back of the video. $125 was the issuing price, which was the price of the first Colt Python that came out in 1955. Here's a representation of the boxes that were used in the 1960s. They had the green box, which I have here, and then they also have the red insert box. And then here's the 1964 ad, which the first reference to the 2.5 Colt Python is entered in there. And then we also have the serial numbers. If you can see that. I've got a picture of this as well on the end of the video. But the 2.5 inch serial number was from, let's see here, sorry, wrong page. In 1963, the serial number range was 24,800 to 30,799. So there's what you got in 63. So the gun publications, Gun World, December 1963, was one of the first ones that picked up on the 2.5 inch Colt Python. And they did a big article on police use. They chronographed it. They talked a lot about it at the 3 or 4 page article. And this was probably the biggest article that was written on the 2.5 inch. So there's Gun World, December 1963. Then you've got Shooting Times, April of well, let's go to this one first. American Rifleman, February of 1964. You've got a small article here on page 50, just describing it in some detail, but that's it, with a picture. Nothing on the cover. April of 1964. Have another small article with a picture, but nothing very promotional by Colt. And then in December of 64, you have a company that is making aftermarket grips for it. So that's all you've got going on in 1964 to promote the 2.5 inch. That's why it's one of the most, one of the rarest of the Colt Pythons. They hardly did anything to promote it. You have Modern Handgun here, which is a 1965 publication. And all this does is give you a picture of it and a little blurb on it. Then this Guns Illustrated finally got one on the cover here, and you dig a little deeper inside, and it's in the middle of this large article here with a picture of it. So they do about a 3 paragraphs on it. But at least they got it on the cover. Shooting times January of '65. Now this is a hog hunting issue. So they've got a large article in here on hog hunting and what they used. So I included the whole article, but they did use the 2.5 inch to kill a hog, so that's pretty impressive. Now I've also included some letters that you can view with the serial numbers. There's one in the 30,000 range, there's this one in the 27,000 range, and then I have also included a couple of pictures of one that I had purchased that when I received it, it didn't have the correct grips on it. It had silver medallions on the grips, which is never a python grip. They're always gold medallions. And the rampant Colt had been buffed off of it, and it looked like it had been re-blued, so I've included those pictures in there. The gentleman that sold it to me was nice enough to give me my money back on it, so I still haven't met a gun guy that was not trustworthy. I've also included a picture of a python with large target grips and also a short barrel, but the serial number was from 1957, and the guy had put it up on Gunbroker, but he also stated in there that it had been re-barreled. So buying something this expensive is not a smart move unless you get it lettered from Colt first, because there's a lot of fakes and re-barreling and grips that aren't right to the gun, and I've just never seen so many oddities going on with these guns because they're so expensive. So as far as the 60s goes, that's pretty much it. It wasn't a big popular seller. I've also included one of the books has got a scale where this is rated a 4, 5 being the rarest of pythons. So I think the 3 inch is a 5, but the 6 inch is a 1. So the scale that I've included rates this one a 4. So they didn't put out too many 2.5 inch barrels. I did deviate a little bit from the 1960s and included 3 movies which I enjoyed that had the 2.5 inch python in it. One was Marlowe, well, in '68, so that would be in the '60s, with James Garner. And then the other 2, one was Charlie Varick in 1973, and then McHugh with John Wayne. I think that was in 1973 as well, or maybe a little later. But there was a guy who had the gun that he had used in that movie, the python that he took out of the trunk of his car. I've included photos of that at the end if you want to scroll through those. So anyway, that's about it for the 1960s Colt Python 2.5 inch. I don't think there's much more to tell. I've looked around for any gun magazines that promoted it more than I just showed you, and I haven't found any. So that's why they're as expensive as they are. So now I'll show you the pictures and the copies of what I've just put up. Here's a brief history of the Colt Python. It's kind of interesting. Here's my gun here, and there's the Colt letter for it. Here's a gun that I had to send back that was $3,500. You can see where there's no rampant Colt on the side, and there's also silver medallions instead of gold medallions on the grips. Also, the bluing isn't quite up to par. I think it had been re-blued. At least that's what Colt had told me. If they've polished it so much where they've taken off the rampant cold, it was probably because of a re-bluing. And so there's an example of that. Here's an example of the barrel that's been swapped out and the bigger grips. And then here's the Colt book with the Ian Fleming gun in it. And then here's a better picture of it right there, 1964. There's the Seven Serpents book. And the COLT PYTHON book. Quite excellent book, by the way. Here's the first ad for the 2.5 inch, and the upper left, the service grips. There's the green box and the wooden boxes. Price list, serial number list, examples of where the 2.5 inch showed up in the gun magazines of the time. Here's the biggest article right here. There's the only place it was featured on the cover. Colt did not have marketing gurus working for them back in the 60s, I'll tell you that. Here's the hog hunt, the picture of the python on the hog. And this is a great handgun book back in 65. And then here's Gun Digest, 1964. It's the first place that the 2.5 inch python appeared. There it is in the lower right hand there corner. It's price list, and they talk about all the new pistols and revolvers. There's a complete article there. And then here's how it was listed in the Gun Digest catalog. Here's another one, 30,000 serial number, but it was also issued in 1963. There's 3 examples of 1963 guns. This one was in October of 63, the 30,000. Here's Marlowe and his 2.5 inch python. And Bruce Lee kicking the light out. And Charlie Varick with his 2.5 inch python. And McHugh grabbing his python out of the trunk. And then this came out of Gunbroker. They said it was that gun that he pulled out of the trunk, but there it is right there. So that's it. That's all there is on the 2.5 inch that I could find. Thanks so much.